Welcome to this short executive knowledge lecture on Topic 6, Paper 3, covering futures, trading and settlement. Now, this topic is probably the most technical of the topics in Paper 3 and needs a bit of concentration. There will be, I reckon, about 7 or 8 questions. The material's not short, neither is it long. It's probably just about right. But this is a topic that you must pay attention to because if you're not familiar with the technical jargon, then the questions are going to be very difficult. I will emphasize the important points to help you understand the core material that you need to know to sit the exam, and a copy of the study notes you can see on the screen can be downloaded in PDF format from the Executive Knowledge website under Paper 3 Resources. As ever, I strongly recommend that you supplement this learning with question practice, and we have hundreds of practice questions on the Examinator.online platform, details of which are at the bottom of each page of the study notes. Now, as you will see on the screen, there are 4 sections to Topic 6. Participantship will cover the concept of futures exchange participantship and futures clearing participantship. And these are the firms that can deal directly with the systems. We will then look at the continuing obligations of both the futures exchange participants and the clearing participants. Then we'll move on and look at the concept of clearing and margin. That's when we get to the clearing house. And finally, the different ways that we can settle futures contracts under settlement. So let's get to participantship. Participantship is like joining a club. In this case, it's the futures exchange or the clearing house. We're starting with the futures exchange. And as it says at the top of page 6.3, to trade on the futures exchange, a licensed corporation registered institution must become a futures exchange participant. And all participants for futures dealing must be registered for or licensed for Type 2 dealing in futures. Now, if you're an applicant for this type of participantship, you must be a Hong Kong incorporated company. I'll repeat that. Be a Hong Kong incorporated company. That is often examined. Cannot be Cayman Islands, PRC, Singapore. Must be a Hong Kong incorporated company. You must fulfill the financial resource rule requirements, pay all the required fees, and acquire a futures exchange trading right. You first must become a participant. Once you're a participant, then you apply for the trading right, at least one. Now, with futures exchange participants, there are 4 categories: trader, broker, futures commission merchant, and merchant trader. Easy to examine. I would say almost certainly there'll be one question on this. So what's the difference between the categories? Well, they're in order of increasing entitlement for the first 3, and then the merchant trader is a one-off. The trader is entitled to trade in futures contracts directly with the systems and our options, that's options on futures, on his or her account only. So we can't take really the market makers. The broker, a little bit more entitlement, can trade in futures contracts options on his own account and as agent of a futures exchange participant. Well, why would a futures exchange participant go through another participant? I can't rightly say, but it is provided for. The futures commission merchant has the widest remit. They are entitled to trade in futures contracts and or options. That'll be options on futures on his own account, and that'll be the house account, for the account of other futures exchange participants. That was similar to the broker. But here we go, and for the account of any other persons. They call themselves FCMs, and they'll be large entities. These are not small businesses. And the merchant trader is a one-off. That would be like an airline or a gold producer that's entitled to trade in futures directly with the exchange for their own business, their own account, their own business. They don't represent anyone else. Okay, let's look page 6.4, paragraph 1.2, and here is a diagram of all the trading and clearing systems. And this takes into account both securities and futures. At paper 3, we're only interested in the right-hand leg. So we can see at the top, we've got the recognized exchange controller, that is Hong Kong Exchange and Clearing Limited, a listed company in Hong Kong. And it owns both the stock exchange and the futures exchange. Now, the futures exchange uses as its trading system the Hong Kong Futures Automated Trading System, HKATS. Now, with HKATS, you will have a future exchange participant representing the buyer, futures exchange participant representing the seller, and they will match trades through HKATS. Once you have a match trade, it's passed on to DCAS, Derivative Clearing and Settlement System, and the futures will be cleared by the Futures Exchange Clearing Corporation through a process that's known as novation. Now, with the clearing, you have a clearing participant for the buyer, a clearing participant for the seller, and the central clearing counterparty, which is the clearing corporation, the clearing house. So the clearing house will buy from the seller and sell to the buyer to clear and settle the trade. We have a similar situation down the left-hand side for stocks, securities, but at paper 3, we don't have to worry about that. Paper 2, you will. Paper 3, you're down the right-hand side. The points at the bottom of page 6.4, each futures exchange participant must be approved and registered with the exchange to trade through HKATS. Each futures participant must be approved for trading each specific type of futures contract product by the exchange. Match buys and sells are transmitted to the clearinghouse for registration and clearing, and that's what I described. Moving on to paragraph 1.3, we're now looking at the clearers, so the Hong Kong Futures Exchange Clearing Corporation participantship. So every clearing participant, and HKCC is Hong Kong Futures Clearing Corporation. So each clearing participant must also be a futures exchange participant. So you have many, many futures exchange participants. Not all of them go on to become clearing participants because it requires systems, staff, and capital. So some choose just to be futures exchange participants, but others, notably the large operators, will be a futures exchange participant and will also be a clearing participant. Now, applicants for clearing participantship must be, as I've just said, first of all, futures exchange participants, operate under the same name which is registered under as a futures exchange participant. You can't have a different name for the clearing operation than for the actual trading operation. They must be the same. You must satisfy the financial resource requirements and agree to abide by the clearinghouse rules. Now, a futures exchange participant can register with the clearinghouse as either a general clearing participant or a clearing participant. And for the exam, we must know the difference between the two. And then we're told a futures exchange participant, which is not a clearing participant, that is futures exchange participant that can trade directly through HKATS, but is not a clearer, must clear futures trades through a general clearing participant. The general clearing participant are the big ones, and it's worth their while to have a clearing function, clearing capabilities, and they can charge non-clearing participants fees to clear through them. So a clearing participant on that simple matrix, clearing participant can record, register, and clear contracts entered itself, and it can also clear contracts for other clearing participants with the approval of the clearinghouse. But it tends to be that they're large organizations. They don't want to be general clearing participants, but it's worth their while financially to do all their own clearing. Whereas a general clearing participant clears for itself and for non-clearing participants. Now, clearing participants may have following types of account: house account, omnibus client account, individual client account, client offset claim account, market maker account. Read through the details, but I would suggest it's very important that you know what they are, because there's a favorite question that says, which one of the following is not a type of clearing account? And the one they put in is a custodian account. No, there is not a custodian account with regard to futures clearing participants. It is the accounts that are listed there. Bottom of 6.5 refers to omnibus client accounts. So clearing participants using the omnibus client account as the default account for their trades, positions are maintained on a gross, long and short basis. We'll come on to the gross versus net a little later. Top of page 6.6, clearing house allows position closing between the following. So this is just what the equivalents are, because we have Hang Seng Index futures and mini Hang Seng Index futures. What's the difference? Well, the Hang Seng Index futures are designed for intermediaries, for institutional investors and traders, whereas the mini Hang Seng Index futures are designed for retail investors. You're not going to be examined on that, but that's the reason we have two categories. And the ratio with regard to closing, the ratio is 1 to 5 in all cases. So 1 Hang Seng Index future to 5 mini Hang Seng Index futures. Same with options, and the same with the Hang Seng China Enterprise Index futures and options. If that comes up, it's one question. Now, what are the continuing obligations of futures exchange participants? Every futures exchange participant obliged to, okay, let's just go through it because all of this can come up. Adhere strictly to the provisions of the legislation, the SFO, the futures exchange rules, and any stipulated conditions. Hold at least one trading right for the futures exchange. As I said earlier, be a Hong Kong incorporated company. Become a clearing participant if it intends to clear its own trades. If not, you're going to go through a general clearing participant. So there's a certain amount of repetition here. Comply with the financial resource rules. Now, these rules are enacted by the SFC itself. Comply with all requirements of Hong Kong Automated Trading System. That's the futures trading system. It then tells us every futures exchange participant must notify the futures exchange in writing immediately. So you got to write to the futures exchange and let them know if you breach their rules, the SFO, subsidiary legislation, which are the rules, or any conditions that are imposed upon the participant. Initiation of receivership proceeding, that's fairly serious, or winding up of the participant, you've got to let the exchange know. Bankruptcy of any directors, exercise of any disciplinary measures against it, and any failure with regard to the equipment systems related to the trading system, HKSI. And every futures exchange participant must provide the futures exchange any information requested by an exchange, regulatory authority, or an organization with an information sharing agreement with Hong Kong Exchange and Clear Limited. In other words, if a credible party asks you to provide information, you must do so. And upon request of the futures exchange chief executive, him or herself, you must submit record statements, documents, telephone recordings that are required by the Code of Conduct. It goes on to tell us at the top of page 6.5 that futures exchange participants must not carry out trade that will create or maintain an artificial price, create a false or misleading appearance of active trading, enter into or carry out any fictitious artificial transaction. I think these points would be fairly obvious if they pop up in a question. Create a corner or otherwise deal for the purpose of manipulating prices. Allow firm to be involved in any unlawful dealing. As I say, I think that's fairly obvious. And futures exchange participants may not assign, sell, transfer, or pledge their privilege as participants. You cannot transfer or sell your participantship or your trading rights. If you want to pull out of the activity, you've got to hand them back to the futures exchange. And no participant may resign its participantship except with the written approval of the futures exchange board.